Ezekiel 19. And take up a lamentation for the leaders of Israel, and you shall say, what a lioness was your mother among the lions. She lay down among the lions, in the midst of young lions, and she reared her cubs. Which tribe is the lion? Judah. It's all parables through here. And she brought up one of her cubs, and he became a young lion, and he learned to tear the prey. He devoured men. Then nations heard of him. He was caught in their pit, and they brought him with chains to the land of Mitzrayim. Joseph. When she saw, as she waited, that her expectancy was lost, she took another of her cubs and made him a young lion. And he went about among the lions and became a young lion. And he learned to tear the prey. He devoured men. And he knew their widows and laid waste to their cities. And the land and all who filled it was stunned by the noise of his roaring. The nations set against him from the provinces on every side, and spread their net over him, and he was caught in their pit. Another young lion. And he learned to tear prey, and he devoured men, and he knew their widows and laid waste to their cities. David. The nations set against him from their provinces on every side, and spread their net over him, and he was caught in their pit. And they put him in a cage in chains, and brought him to the king of Babylonian exile, Hezekiah. And they brought him in nets, so his roar was no longer heard on the mountains of Israel. Your mother was like a vine in your vineyard planted by the waters, a bearer of fruit and branching because of many waters. John 15, vine and branches. And she had strong rods for scepters of rulers, and her stature was exalted among the thick branches, and was seen in her height with the mass of its branches. But she was uprooted in wrath. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered. Fire consumed them. Judgment from Yah. And now she is planted in the wilderness, the exile, the diaspora, in a dry and thirsty land. And fire went out from a rod of her branches. It devoured her fruit, so that she has no strong rod, a scepter to rule. This is a lament, and shall be a lament. Chapter 20. Covenants and transgressions of. And it came to be in the 7th year, in the 5th month, of the 10th of the new moon. That's just saying of the 10th of the month, because the month starts at the new moon, or the dark of the moon, and then progresses to the full moon. That's why if you keep Leviticus 11, whenever you look up into the sky on Pesach, the night of watches, the moon is full. Or on the first night of Sukkot, the moon is full. And it came to be, in the 7th year, in the 5th month, on the 10th of the new moon, that certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of Yahweh, and sat before me. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel, and say to them, Thus said the Master Yahweh, Have you come to inquire of me? As I live, I am not being inquired of by you, declares the Master Yahweh. Judge them, son of man, judge them. Make known to them the abominations of their fathers. So the elders come to Ezekiel to sit before him, so that Ezekiel might inquire of Yah. And Yah said, essentially, these guys came to talk to me. Before they talk to me, make sure that they know of their abominations. They need to get their house in order before they come talk to me. Isaiah, your sins have created a separation between you and Yah. Judge them, son of man. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Judge and judge righteously according to the law. What's the law? The Torah. Paul, Shaul of Tarsus, I knew not sin but by the law, because sin is transgression of the law. 1 John 3 verse 4, which means you need to know what the law is in order to know what sin is, which is why Modern Christianity is filled with hypocrisy because they preach against sin, yet they don't teach what it is. Because if they had to teach what it was, this whole nail to the cross doctrine would fall by the wayside about that fast. And you shall say to them, thus said the Master Yahweh, on the day when I chose Israel and lifted my hand in an oath to the seed of the house of Jacob, and made myself known to them in the land of Mitzrayim, I lifted my hand in an oath to them, saying, I am Yahweh, your Elohim. On that day I lifted my hand in an oath, swore an oath, to them, to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim, into a land that I had searched out for them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all lands. And I said to them, each one of you throw away the abominations which are before his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. But they rebelled against me, and would not obey me. All of them did not throw away the abominations which were before their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Mitzrayim. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them to complete my displeasure against them in the midst of the land of Mitzrayim. This is the Exodus with Moshe. But I acted for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned before the eyes of the nations among whom they were, before whose eyes I had made myself known to them, to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim. So I took them out of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, and I brought them into the wilderness, and I gave them my laws, and showed them my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. Which if a man does, he shall live by them. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 19, verse 17. We'll start in 16. And see, one came and said to him, Yeshua, Jesus, Messiah, Good teacher, Rabbi, what good shall I do to have everlasting life? So a guy asked Jesus, how do I have everlasting life? And his response was, verse 17, and he, Yeshua, said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you wish to enter into life, guard the commands. Yeah, well, that means we have to do Jesus' commands, not the old commands. They were nailed to the cross. Verse 18. But he said to him, which commands? And Yeshua, Messiah, answered, said to him, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, respect your father and your mother. The 10 commands, Exodus. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19, verse 18. And all of Leviticus 19 is about being set apart unto Yah, a.k.a. Torah. The young man said to him, all these I have watched over from my youth, what do I still lack? And Yeshua said to him, if you wish to be perfect, he did not say that you're bad. He said, if you wish to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me. And when the young man heard the word, he went away sad because he had many possessions. In other words, he was keeping the commands, but he didn't love Yah with all of his heart. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. The Shema, the holiest prayer in all the Bible, followed by Deuteronomy 6, 5. And you shall love the Lord your God, Yahweh your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. So which commands are we to guard over if you have everlasting life? Well, it looks like Yeshua sure quoted a whole bunch of the Old Testament right here. And Yeshua said to his taught ones, truly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of the heavens. And this, of course, in 24 is just one of those examples of bad transliteration. And I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. The Arabic word gamla, or gamala, means camel. It also means rope. So if you know anything about rope and sewing needles, which makes more sense here? It's easier to shove a camel through the eye of a needle, or it's easier to right? You can't put a rope through the eye of a needle. I'm going to go with a rope. Yeah. If you've ever wondered, why does he say that? Why would you put a camel through the eye of a needle? Transliteration, leading to bad translation. Gamala is rope. It's also camel. And in my reading of this Bible, Yeshua is very common sense. So I don't think he was trying to shove a camel through the eye of a needle. My point here being, if we go back to Ezekiel 20, verse 11, and I gave them my laws and showed them my right rulings, which if a man does them, he shall live by them. Everlasting life, keep the commands. The Torah is about the preservation of life in this age and in the next. Proof of that, Revelation. Revelation 14, verse 12. The end of the book about the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, written by the Apostle John on the Isle of Patmos, approximately 90 AD. Here's the endurance of the set-apart ones, the saints, the endurance of. Here are those guarding the commands of Elohim and the belief of Yeshua Messiah. You want more proof text? Look back over to Revelation chapter 12, verse 17. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, which is the remnant. And he sent to fight with the remnant of her seed, those guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. And, not either or, both. So back to Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 11. And I gave them my laws and showed them my right rulings, which if a man does them, he shall live by them. And then look at verse 12. And I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me, to know that I am Yahweh who sets them apart. A sign between Yahweh and his people. A lot of people wonder about, people talk about the mark of the beast all the time in Revelation. And usually the people who talk about that haven't read Revelation, or if they have, it's been piecemeal, or they had some guy standing behind a podium, or worse yet, some TikToker trying to teach them about Revelation. Instead of reading the book, because the Father seals his people in the forehead first, before the enemy seals his people in the forehead or in the hand. Because the enemy, Satan, is a copycat. No original ideas come from Satan. It's all copied from what Yah does. And see, the Sabbath, and I also gave them my Sabbaths, plural, not just the weekly Sabbath, to be a sign between them and me, to know that I am Yahweh who sets them apart. But also, all of Leviticus 23, my Sabbaths, plural, the Moedim, the high holy days. A sign of a covenant. Just like your wedding ring is a sign of a covenant between you and your wife. The Sabbath is a sign between the Father and his people. So how does the Father know who his people are? That would be real easy to figure out. I believe that Messiah, based upon biblical reading, will return on his second coming on the Day of Atonement. It'll be real easy to look around and figure out who's observing the Day of Atonement, one of the Father's Sabbaths, and who isn't. Verse 13, but the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my laws, and they rejected my right rulings. Now, if we want to get into replacement theology, which is doctrinally part of Big C Christendom, but biblically an abomination, because there's 1,000 verses in this Bible that refute replacement theology, all of which are in the Old Testament, which is why most people don't know that it's not biblical. But if we go with the doctrine of replacement theology, essentially meaning that Israel didn't do what God wanted them to do, so God abandoned them, even though he says repeatedly, I will not forsake you, an everlasting covenant. Look at why Israel was given up to exile, and then ask yourself, is this something that the church adheres to now? Because the answer is no. Verse 13, but the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my laws, neither does the church. They rejected my right rulings. So does the church. Which if a man does them, he shall live by them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths. The church doesn't keep the Moedim, but they do keep pagan fertility rituals like Easter. And they do bow down to evergreen trees like on Christmas. Then I said I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to consume them. Not looking so great for the church either, according to replacement theology, by the word of God, which Malachi 3 verse 6 does not change. Yeah, but Jesus said, well, if Jesus was God and God doesn't change, then how did Jesus say anything different than what God said? Or have you been lied to your whole life? Yeah. Which is why I always encourage you to read your own Bible, not take my word for it. Because they hid this stuff right here in black and white in the entirety of the book. But I acted for my name's sake, not to profane it before the nations, before whose eyes I had brought them out. And I myself also lifted my hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, not to bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all lands. Because they rejected my right rulings, and did not walk in my laws, and they profaned my Sabbaths. For their heart went after their idols. So they lost the opportunity to enter into the promised land, because they were disobedient to Yah. Again, think about the parallel to the church here. They lost the opportunity to enter into the promised land because they were disobedient to Yah. Because they rejected my right rulings and did not statutes and ordinances and did not walk in my laws, Torah, and they profaned my Sabbaths. For their heart went after their idols. One word for you, iconography. Even though it says clearly in Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments, do not make graven images, iconography. And my eye pardoned them. Oh, but yeah, he gave them up. And my eye pardoned them from destroying them. And I did not make an end of them in the wilderness. And I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the laws of your fathers, nor observe their rulings, nor defile yourselves with their idols. Don't do what your parents are doing because they're doing it wrong. Yeah, but my grandpa said, my pastor said, my mom said, my friends from, men's group said, don't do what your parents are doing because they're doing it wrong. Do not walk in the laws of your fathers, nor observe their rulings, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and do them. And do them. Don't talk about it. Don't pray about it. Don't think about it. Don't contemplate it. And do them. And set apart my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you. Plural, Sabbaths. Leviticus 23. To know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Yeah, but that was nailed to the cross, Bear. We don't have to do that. Colossians 2, verse 14. We'll start at 13. From the mouth of Shaul of Tarsus. If we look at Colossians chapter 1. Shaul, Paul, an emissary of Yeshua Messiah, by the desire of Elohim, and Timothy our brother, to the set apart ones, to the saints, and Colossae, and true brothers in Messiah. True brothers in Messiah. So that's who's writing this. That's who it's written to. Colossians 2:13. And you, being dead in your trespasses, having broken Torah, and the uncircumcision of your flesh outside of the covenant, he, Yeshua, made alive together with him, Yeshua, having forgiven you all trespasses, made an atoning sacrifice for your sin, which is patterned on the Old Testament Levitical sacrificial system, BT dubs. And there is absolutely a Torah for redemption, by the way, to redeem a brother, which is exactly what Yeshua did. Having blotted out that which was written by hand against us. The Torah was written with the finger of Elohim. What was written by hand is written by men. How do we know that? By the dogmas, which stood against us, not the Torah, not the right rulings, the doctrines and dogmas of men. And he, Yeshua, has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the stake, to the staros, to the cross. What was nailed to the cross was the doctrines and dogmas of men. Having stripped the principalities and authorities, not stripped Yah, not stripped the Torah, having stripped the principalities and the authorities, he, Yeshua, made a public display of them, having prevailed over them in it. Let no one, therefore, judge you in eating or in drinking or in respect of a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of what to come, but the body of Messiah. You as the body of Messiah, let no one judge you. Because these doctrines and dogmas were nailed to the stake, let no one judge you when you eat and drink and respect the festival and the new moons and the Sabbaths as the body of Messiah. This is what the body of Messiah does. Don't be judged for it, because the doctrines and dogmas that would condemn that, that's what Yeshua nailed to the stake. Remembering that the Sabbath is a sign. The Sabbaths are a sign between the Father and his people. Let no one deprive you of the prize, one who takes delight in false humility and worship of angels, taking his stand on what he has not seen, puffed up by his fleshly mind, and not holding fast to the head, Yeshua, from whom all the body, us, nourished and knit together by joints and ligaments, grows with the growth of Elohim. The growth of who? Of Elohim. The whole point of Yeshua is to make atonement for you so you can come back to Elohim, so you can be part of the family again. If then you died with Messiah from the elementary matters of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourself to dogmas? Do not touch, do not taste, do not handle, which are all to perish with use, according to the commands and teachings of men. That's what Colossians 2 says. When we talk about nailed to the cross, we're talking about doctrines and dogmas of men that were nailed to the cross, which are all to perish with use according to the commands and teachings of men. Not of Elohim, of men. Back to Ezekiel 20, verse 19. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Walk in my laws and guard my right rulings and do them, and set apart my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you to know that I am Yahweh, your Elohim. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my laws and my right rulings, and they did not guard to do them, which, if a man does them, he shall live by them. They profaned my Sabbaths. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them, to complete my displeasure against them in the wilderness. John, Gospel of, chapter 12, Yochanan. Verse 50, 12 verse 50. Yeshua speaking, and I know that his command is everlasting life. Whose command? Yahweh's command, Elohim's command. And I know that his command is everlasting life. Therefore, whatever I speak, as the Father has said to me, so I speak. Nothing new coming from Messiah, as the Father has told him to speak. Malachi 3 verse 6, I'm the Lord Yahweh Sabaoth, I change not. So Yeshua speaks. And I know that his command is everlasting life, says Yeshua. Back to Ezekiel. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my laws and my right rulings. They did not guard to do them, which if a man does them, he shall live by them. They profaned my Sabbaths. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them, to complete my displeasure against them in the wilderness. But I held back my hand and acted for my name's sake, not to profane it before the eyes of the nations, before whose eyes I had brought them out. Also I myself lifted my hand in an oath to those in the wilderness, to scatter them among the nations, to disperse them throughout the lands. So Yah's lifting his hand in these oaths. Who do you think has a better track record at keeping their word, keeping their oaths? Yahweh our Elohim, God, or us? This is why the renewed covenant found in Hebrews chapter 8, which is a direct quote, the new covenant is a direct quote from the Old Testament, Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 through 34. That's how new it is. It's so new it's found in the Old Testament, in the second major prophet, Jeremiah. That's why it says in the renewed covenant, for finding fault with them as us. Not for finding fault with Yahweh, for finding fault with us. Because when Yahweh lifts his hand, he means it. There is scripture for this. His word will not return to him void. His word won't return to him void. How many times has your word returned to you void? So who's the transgressor in this equation? God or us? Also I lifted my hand in an oath to those in the wilderness, to scatter them among the nations, to disperse them throughout the lands, because they had not done my right rulings, and they rejected my laws, and they profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were on their fathers' idols. Also, I gave them up to the laws that were not good, and right rulings by which they would not live, the laws of man. And I defiled them by their own gifts, as they passed all their firstborn through the fire, so that I might stun them, so that they know that I am Yahweh. Yah defiled them with their bad offerings. Remember, the Torah is about the preservation of life, and they're burning their children in fire to make offering, so that Yah might stun them, give them pause. Be still and know that I am Yahweh your Elohim, so that they might know that I am Yahweh. Therefore, son of man, Yehezkel, Ezekiel, speak to the house of Israel. Remember, this is the house of Israel, the elders of which who have come to Ezekiel asking to inquire of Yah. And this is what Yah is telling Ezekiel to say to them. Let me remind you all the times that Yah lifted his hand in an oath to protect and bless these people, and all the times you transgressed against that before you come and inquire of me. Therefore, son of man, Ezekiel, speak to the house of Israel, and you shall say this to them. Thus said the Master Yahweh, in this your fathers have further reviled me by committing trespass against me. When I brought them into the land for which I had lifted my hand in an oath to give them, and they saw all the high hills and all the thick trees, they slaughtered their slaughterings there and provoked me with offerings there. And they sent up sweet fragrance there and poured out their drink offerings there. And I said to them, what is this high place to which you go? So its name is called High Place to this day. Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus said the Master Yahweh, are you defiling yourselves in the way of your fathers? And do you whore after their abominations? For when you lift up your gifts and make your sons pass through the fire, you defile yourselves with all your idols, even to this day. And shall I be inquired of by you, O house of Israel? As I live, declares the Master Yahweh, I am not being inquired of by you. And what comes up in your spirit shall never be when you say, let us be like the nations, like the tribes in other lands serving wood and stone. As I live, declares the Master Yahweh, do not I, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, Yod, and with wrath poured out, reign over you? And I shall bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the lands where you are scattered with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm, Yod, and with wrath poured out. And I shall bring you into the wilderness of the peoples and shall enter into judgment with you face to face there. You didn't listen to me before when I tried to give you all the good things that I promised to you. You will know who I am now when I have to bring you out into the wilderness, again to suffer with a mighty hand. As I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, so I shall enter into judgment with you, declares the Master Yahweh. And I shall make you pass under the rod, and shall bring you into the bond of the covenant, separating the wheat from the chaff, passing under the rod. My God would never do that. Your God's make-believe. Well, my Jesus would. Tell me about what your Jesus would do. Revelation 19, verse 11. And I saw the heaven open, and there was a white horse, and he, Yeshua, who sat on him, was called trustworthy and true, and in righteousness he judges and fights, makes war. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written, which no one had perceived except himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, his name is called the Word of Yahuwah. Why blood? Because the high priest makes the sacrifices, and he gets blood on his robe, and blood is the sign of a covenant. And his name is called the Word of Yahuwah. What is the Word of Yahuwah? In the beginning was the Word. Yup, Yeshua. What's the Word? Debar. I give you a hint. Deuteronomy in Hebrew is Debarim. Im is plural. Words. His name was called the Word of Yahuwah. Debar HaYahuwah. The Torah. And the armies in the heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses, and out of his mouth, Yeshua's mouth, goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron. He shall shepherd them with a rod of iron. Revelation 19. 3 chapters away from the very last word in this book. And I shall make you pass under the rod, and shall bring you into the bond of the covenant, separating the wheat from the chaff, and purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. From the land where they sojourn I bring them out, the diaspora, scattered to all the nations. Why? To fulfill the promise, the covenant made to Abraham in Genesis, that his seed, Bamidbar, his seed, his genetics, shall be the esteem of all nations. And purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. From the land where they sojourn I bring them out, but they shall not come into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah. As for you, O house of Israel, thus said the Master Yahuwah, go, serve each of you his idols, and afterwards, if you are not listening to me, but do not profane my set-apart name any more with your gifts and your idols. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. That doesn't mean don't say GD, although I hate GD. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me. It means don't put Yah's stamp of approval on your bullshit. And you have that right here. But do not profane my set-apart name any more with your gifts and your idols. For on my set-apart mountain, on the mountain height of Israel, declares the Master Yahuwah, there all the house of Israel, all of them in the land, shall serve me. There I shall accept them, and there I shall require your offerings and the first fruits of your offerings, together with all of your set-apart gifts. As a sweet fragrance I shall accept you when I bring you out from the peoples, and I shall gather you out of the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall be set apart in you before the nations. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah when I bring you into the land of Israel, into the land for which I lifted my hand in an oath to give to your fathers. And there you shall remember your ways and all your deeds with which you were defiled. And you shall loathe yourselves in your own sight because of all the evils that you did. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah when I have dealt with you for my name's sake, not according to your evil ways, nor according to your corrupt deeds, O house of Israel, declares the Master Yahweh. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face towards the south, and drop word against the south, and prophesy against the forest land of the south. And you shall say to the forest of the south, Hear the word of Yahweh. Thus said the Master Yahweh, See, I am kindling a fire in you, and it shall devour every green tree and every dry tree in you. The blazing flame is not quenched, and it shall burn all faces from the south to the north. And all flesh shall see that I, Yahweh, have kindled it, and it is not quenched. And I said, Ah, Master Yahweh, they are saying to me, Is he not speaking in parables? Master, they're not getting it. What shall I say to them? This devouring fire. Gospel of Luke 23. (23:31). Yeshua speaking, starting 29. For look, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and wombs that never bore, and the breasts which never nursed. Because things are going to be so bad that people will be saying, Praise God, at least you don't have kids to go through this. Then they shall begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and the hills cover us. Because if they do this to the green tree, what is going to be done to the dry tree? If all this is befalling those, the green tree that are bearing fruit, what shall happen to the dry tree, those that aren't bearing any fruit at all? Now, there's an interesting thing that happens if you know anything about forest fires. The dead trees are the fuel. They fuel the forest fire. The green trees, they'll get scorched. But by and large, they're fine. They go through the fire too. Yeah, that goes to the concept of the rapture. Get the question all the time, Bear, are you pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib? I'm none of that, because that's all make-believe. Research John Darby. It didn't start with Darby, but Darby popularized the concept of the rapture. It's make-believe. Because the green trees go through the fire too, and they may be scorched, but they're not wholly consumed. And in many cases, certain species of green trees require the fire in order for them to be able to drop their seed so that they can reproduce the next generation. It's the dead trees that are burned up for fuel. The green trees stand in the midst of the fire, but they're not consumed by it. The dead trees, they're wholly consumed. Ezekiel 19 and 20. Bless y'all. Shalom.